Some call him Mr. No. Joining me now is the Congressman from Kentucky's 4th District, Representative Thomas Massie. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me on today, Andrew.
All right, let me just start with this. I was very vocal on my radio program, on this program, on social media, that I stood with you over the budget issues, especially as it relates to the CARES Act. And I tried to explain this to anyone that would listen. That does not mean you oppose President Trump. You can support both men equally.
Right.
With that said, you are 100% right about where we were going and where we are right now. The Democrats are talking about another $2 trillion spending package. Nancy Pelosi wants another $2 trillion in spending. I want to get a little bit more philosophical with you on this. The Democrats seem to want to uncouple or de-link the relationship between work and an income. They've wanted universal basic income. They've wanted to inflate the minimum wage to $15. It's $600 a week. You don't have to do a whole lot of math to figure out they've already gotten there. I hear from a lot of Republicans that this is going to sunset. It's going to happen. I'm having a hard time buying that, considering that if we get to 3 months, 4 months, $600 a week or more, the election's coming up, the Democrats are going to say, vote Democrat, universal basic income.
Yeah, the $600. I mean, look, that's here for a long time, and the federal government shouldn't have gotten involved in that. I'm hearing from small businesses who want to take advantage of the PPP that they can't get their employees to come back to work because their employees are receiving more money at home than they ever did at work. I mean, that's a problem. And then when this program expires, they're going to blame us for taking it away from them. Anytime you give something to somebody, even if it's a temporary program, there's always this inertia to reauthorize it. And by the way, a month ago, when I said that Congress needs to show up to work in order to pass bills, I said if truckers and nurses and grocery store workers are coming to work, Congress needs to come to work. That was just about following the Constitution. And I know some people got mad at me then, but now I'm glad to see the president and other members of the Republican Party have come around to my side. Now that they've seen Nancy Pelosi eating ice cream at home, they're arguing that we should show up for work. That was my basic premise a month ago when I said, if you're going to pass the biggest spending bill in the history of mankind, you should show up for work.
You know, one of the things that the president should be made aware of, and I hope he takes your counsel, is that all of this spending is going to be blamed on him in the end, right? I mean, it's like the pitcher.
Oh, yeah.
Pitcher takes the win or the loss. Even though the Democrats in the House of Representatives are drawing up these insane spending bills, if they pass and this president signs them into law, which I sincerely hope he doesn't, I begged him not to sign the last one, come October, come a month before the election, the Democrats are going to talk about out-of-control debt and deficit spending, and they're going to blame this president for their bills.
Also, I think you're going to see inflation. Look, when people stay home and they're not making food or they're not making appliances, there's less of that in the grocery store or on the shelves at the big box stores. Yet we're trying to make sure that they have the same amount of income by just sending the money out. And in some cases, it's gone to dead people. But that's going to cause inflation. He'll get blamed for that. He'll get blamed for the shortages. I guess if you're a collapsitarian or an accelerationist, in other words, those aren't real political parties.
Collapsitarian is, I guess that's the term for someone who believes in managed decline, a collapsitarian. Is that what that is?
Well, a collapsitarian is somebody who thinks the only way out of this is total failure, and then you put the pieces back together. I can tell you that I have a few friends who are collapsitarians, and they think we're on the right track, so that should concern you. And I have a few friends who are accelerationists. Those are the ones who say that the dollar is basically going to go to zero with what the Fed is doing. You know, we had a conference call yesterday with Chairman Powell, and he's basically telling us, you know, you stay on the sidelines. The Fed has got this. You gave us $400+ billion to underwrite a bunch of loans, and they're going to issue $4 trillion of debt that the American taxpayers are going to be on the hook for. And, you know, I think people on the left should be upset, Andrew, because this is a big transfer of wealth Now, we're not talking about where it's going to come from. It's going to come from the working people of the United States. They are going to be subsidizing the government's favorite companies.
You know, Andrew Cuomo has been lecturing that your state, actually, he put it squarely on the shoulders of Kentucky. His contention is that New York is bailing out Kentucky, or has been bailing out Kentucky all this time, and it's time for a little payback. What I'm noticing is that the Democrats seem to want to bail out poorly functioning states, states with overspending, pension liabilities. You know, why should the well-managed states have to pay through the federal government to bail out the poorly managed states? Why should voters in Kentucky subsidize the pension liabilities of Illinois?
Well, we shouldn't, and we shouldn't bail out any of the states. Look, it's these governors who are acting like miniature tyrants. They've shut down their economies. They're the ones who are responsible for the lack of income coming to their states. And by the way, to the governor of New York, if he thinks that the legislation subsidizes people in Kentucky, then tell all of the representatives and senators from New York to quit voting for it. They're the ones that vote for all this junk. Tell the representatives from California, quit voting for it if they think they're subsidizing Kentucky. The reality is, at the end of the day, you can slosh the money around, but in Kentucky, we make things. We grow food, we make appliances, we create energy, and a lot of that goes to New York. And they're going to see shortages of that if our governor keeps copying their governor, which is what he's done. He's basically cribbing off of their governor. He's shut down our churches. He sent the state troopers out to take pictures of the license plates of the church goers while he's letting the felons out.
You know, if we could actually get these Democrats to stay on this track, maybe they would start talking about the fair tax or the flat tax or some other reduction in the federal income tax. Because if what they want to do is run their states autonomously, and each of the Democrat governors have said 10th Amendment, all of a sudden they're 10th Amendment, except when they want the money, then maybe they should start agreeing with people like you and your colleague Rand Paul, who say, we tax too much at the federal level. Let's have a flat tax. Let's have a fair tax. Let's reduce the federal burden. And then Andrew Cuomo can tax whatever he wants. The Democrats in New York and California, Oregon, Washington State, Illinois, wherever, Michigan, they can tax to any level they want and spend to any level they want and only have themselves to blame.
Well, what they want is to use the federal government's power to print money and to borrow endlessly. But the one thing the states can't do is print money. You know, maybe we should repeal the 16th Amendment and go back to taxing based on the number of citizens in the state. That should make New York and California happy, shouldn't it? But that 16th Amendment is what enabled the IRS, though, to exist. And there's going to be a price to pay. We used to say that our children or our grandchildren we're going to be saddled with this debt. I don't think we're going to make it a year or two beyond this year before the roosters come home, the hens come home to roost, or the cows come home, whatever the analogy is. The poo's going to hit the fan, let's use that one, in the next year or two with our monetary policy.
Let me ask you this. 30 million people plus have filed for unemployment. They are getting some form of assistance from the government. One of your colleagues, I'm kind of sick of bringing up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but it's the hits that keep on coming. She says people shouldn't go back to these jobs. They shouldn't have to work these jobs to put food on the table. Who do these Democrats think are going to be around to pay the taxes to support all this spending? You know, the 400 richest people that they're always pointing at are going to offshore their money. Many corporations are going to downsize or offshore as much as we're trying to attract manufacturing back to the United States. Which class of people do they think are going to be willing to pay those Scandinavian tax rates or more to subsidize 30, 40, 50 million people who are all voting and collecting without working?
It's going to be the people that work in this society that are going to bear this burden. And right now, they're trying to pretend that you can take water out of the deep end of the pool and put it in the shallow end of the pool and make the water deeper in the shallow end. It's just their economics don't work. And this is, I mean, there are going to be dire consequences of this. But instead of just blaming AOC, why don't you blame some of my colleagues? I mean, they're ready to rush back to Washington, D.C. for the next tranche of money, the next $2 trillion. And I have said, and I'll keep maintaining this, that these $2 trillion payments are like blood transfusions to a patient whose arteries are severed. We need to stop the bleeding before we do another blood transfusion. Otherwise, the blood just pours out. Our economy is the patient that I'm talking about, and it's on life support right now.
This is something I don't understand. You know, I listen to some Republicans who will tell me up and down and left and right that they are conservative, but you're right. So many of them are ready to vote for another $2 trillion. If we can't get Republicans to stop this, then who's going to stop it? And I understand that Republicans don't control the House of Representatives. Their votes are almost meaningless in the House. Thank God we still have Republicans controlling the Senate, and Mitch McConnell I have a lot of criticism for, but he has said, hold on, let's put the brakes on this. I mean, I don't understand what Republicans are thinking if they're even considering another $2 trillion in stimulus.
Well, some of them say we have to do something, and they'll go back home to their town halls and they'll say, well, I had to vote for it because we had to do something, or it had this part that I liked and it had this part I didn't like. And I know people don't like to talk about process reform, but what we've got to get away from are these giant omnibus bills where you do 10 things in one bill. Let's separate the bills and let's vote on them independently. And conservatives, or the people who claim to be conservative, should be arguing for one bill, one topic. That way they don't have to go back home and be ashamed of what they voted for, because they can vote on these bills individually. That's what we need to get back to, but I'm afraid we're going in the other direction. They're just going to throw more things inside of these bills.
All right, I got to leave it there, Congressman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Andrew.